Our goal when we came onto this was to do the Conan of the books and of the comics, which we didn't really feel had been accomplished in the first film. Roy and I discovered that it worked really well for me to write the first scene and get to the point where I was burning out. Then he would take over, and then he would continue writing until the point that he was burning out. Then I would be rejuvenated by that point and come back in. And so we just basically tag-teamed the script.
The movie contained a lot of things that were taken either from Howard's original stories or from the comic books. The most noticeable, Zula. A few years earlier, when I was writing Conan, I had wanted to make up a black hero. I felt there should be a black hero who was sort of like a Conan type. I gave him sort of vaguely hypnotic magical powers to make him sort of sword and sorcerer in one person. I was combining Mandrake the magician and his assistant Lothar into one character is what it really was. And I named the character Zula because the A ending in a lot of African language is masculine rather than feminine in English. So I thought Zula was a nice name, kind of typical comic booky name taken from Zulu. We wanted somebody different from the blonde Valeria in the first movie, so we thought a black Amazon warrior type would be very good, and we just stuck the name Zula on because it had been in the comics and it sounded kind of feminine, even though in the comics it had been a man, and it was supposed to be just a holding name, you know, until we thought of something better. And people kind of began to like Zula, so we just ended up keeping it. So there are two Zulas. In the comic book, there's the man, and in the movie, there's the woman.
And as we were discussing between ourselves earlier, the casting of Grace Jones was something that I can't say that we were directly responsible for, but we came up with the idea of using someone like Grace Jones.
A lot of the scenes in the movie look like the scenes we wrote, you know, and so forth. They're, you know, they're not the same, but they're similar or they're based on them or whatever. But one scene that Richard Fleischer and Stanley Mann, between them, added totally was the introduction of Zula, in which you see her surrounded by an angry army of villagers, and she's tethered by one leg, and she's having to hold them off before he rescues her. And that was entirely their invention. Valeria was the love interest in the first movie, although she's only named in the credits. Somehow the name never quite made it into the movie as it got edited. But she was killed, so one of the comics I had done, in fact, the very last color Conan I had done, 10 years anniversary issue, had a sorcerer promising to bring his lady love, who wasn't Valeria but was the same kind of character, to life if he would do this, you know, rather unpleasant task for him. And Conan was very tempted to do it. And at the end, he decides he can't do it. It just isn't right to do. So he forgoes the chance of bringing his beloved back to life and so forth. And near the end of the as Gerry and I were working on the fourth draft, or really the fifth draft of the film, and Richard Fleischer was the director coming in, I remember telling Richard, you know, I said, you know, about this element, which they didn't want me to do originally, but I thought, gee, maybe it was time to add that back in. And he really sparked the idea, so I loaned him a copy of that comic book, and that ended up making its way into the movie and gave it a little bit of an extra motivation for Conan and a tie-in with the first movie, which I rather liked. In other cases, we had to leave things out. For example, we had wanted to have, in particular, I wanted to have that giant spider. It was supposed to be a spider the size of a pig. It was described by Howard in the story The Tower of the Elephant. And we had that all ready to go in the movie when we were working on it, and we had a meeting with an executive on another project at another studio, and he started to tell us about this sword and sorcery science fiction movie they were making, you know, called Crawl, and it had a crystal spider in it, a giant crystal spider. So there went that idea, because it would just look like we were copying the other movie if it came out first. So we started thinking about what are we going to do instead of the spider. So we made up this idea of leeches. I guess the African Queen with Humphrey Bogart was part of the inspiration.
Conan was going to swim through a sewer that went under the tower, come up through a grating into a subterranean vault that had these holes in the wall that start off as little tiny holes where you see little tiny leeches. And then as you climb up the vault, you know, the holes start getting bigger and the leeches get bigger until you're up near the very top of the vault and there's this giant hole. The big moment of this film. And it survived through every single draft and all the changes that, you know, we incorporated for Dino until
the end.
One of the recurring story points that we had was this battle of the gods. And one of the bad gods was going to be this god, Dagoth, that was the evil god.
He was the devil.
He was the
basically,
devil.
Yeah.
And we wanted to have him have wings and fly, and we're going to have a big battle on top of a cliff and all of this. I think some of that is survived in the comic book version.
Yeah, well,
that
all
we
of it
later
survived
did.
in the comic book version.
Yeah, well, it was sort of the alternate movie version. And we were going to have this spectacular fight where in midair with Conan having to hack away at this giant bat-like creature. And again, as I say, financially, this would have been enormous. I mean, because we didn't have digital effects back then. And Dino, rightly, probably given the fact that opticals at that point were fairly crude, did not want to have any optical effects in the film if he could avoid it. So I guess we knew going along, as we were progressing along, that a lot of our bigger moments weren't going to survive. But most of the process of doing the 5 drafts was in whittling down, the original visuals, to something that was more doable as a feature.